Welcome back, Pokemon fans. It is top 8 time here in Memphis, Tennessee. Kirk, Doob Snacks Dubé.
With John Kettler here, bringing you the top 8 of the 2018 Pokemon Regional Championship here in Memphis, Tennessee. Out of nearly 800 players, we've got our creme de la creme, our top 1%, the top 8.
Cream always rises to the top. Little Macho Man Randy Savage there for you. So, got an interesting top 8 breakdown. We've got Gustavo Wada versus Justin Kolzar, Ty Palacchio, I believe is how you say his last name, Kyle Lesnowitz, Alex Kreckler, can't read that writing, of course.
That's right. Well, at least it isn't my handwriting, because my handwriting is ugly.
Daniel Altavilla, there we go. And then Grant Manley versus Michael Bergerac. So, Gustavo, Justin, we know what they're playing. Gustavo's playing Psychic Malamar.
Right.
Justin, Rayquaza. Ty, Buzzrock. Kyle, Buzzrock. Alex, Buzzrock. Mr. Altavilla, Psychic Malamar.
That's right.
Grant, Zoro Control. Michael Bergerac, Buzzrock. So, in the essence of bringing you what we hope will be the best matchup, we are getting Gustavo, and we're kind of tipping our cap to him, who's cobbled together a great tournament.
Absolutely.
Definitely has led the pack and has never relinquished of that top spot. So we're going to put him on camera, and we're going to grab Justin. We're going to bring him on camera. That's going to be our top 8 feature match here. Again, trying to stay away from ones that might be impending on weakness, etc.
Yeah, for sure. And granted, while weakness doesn't always result in a loss, I mean, we've seen that as early as the very beginning of the tournament yesterday. Sometimes even metal decks find a way to beat fire decks. Nevertheless, we want to go ahead and hedge our bets a little bit. Interesting matchup here, kind of keeping things fresh out of a very large field. A couple decks you may or may not have seen before already. At any rate, it should be a pretty good match.
Absolutely. I anticipate a good one. These players slogged through 14 rounds, a very, very long day 2, an even longer day 1. And here we are, top 8 time in Memphis. Going to tell the story of Gustavo, as I mentioned, led the pack all day long, never relinquished that top spot at all.
And a very good point to bring up about Gustavo, even though this is a North American regional championship, Gustavo is actually from Brazil. He is an international player if there ever was one. Tons of accolades, tons of success in the past, but part of that is largely due to joining the tournament circuit. If you want to be able to win, you actually have to go play, and he's been able to go play a lot here in the United States. Going to other regionals, he's done well before. I believe top 4 at, was it Tampa? Was it Florida last year? At any rate, he did make top 4 at a Florida area regional championship in the expanded format. Bring in the heat here, bring in more opportunities to get even more accolades and even more success.
Mr. Kolsar, Justin, was in a situation where if he win his last round, he gets up to 32 points. His resistance just strong enough to edge out Mr. Taylor, who he had around 13, who took an intentional draw around 14 and unfortunately found himself outside looking in.
Yeah, that's right. In order to decide tiebreakers, there's this thing called resistance. Opponents win records. So if you've got the same record as somebody else, the same match points, that's what's going to break it down. And unfortunately for Mr. Taylor, it was just not the points that he needed. So something that's pretty much out of your control to an extent. Unfortunate, but that's just the way the game works sometimes.
Consolation prize for the 9th place finisher today. Mr. Taylor will be leaving with the same amount of money that he would have gotten if he had lost in top 8. That money being ponied up by the tournament organizer here, just trying to soften the blow of getting those 32 match points and falling just outside of the top 8. So these players are shuffling up. I believe they do have their headphones on.
That's what I believe so. But we're going to go ahead and just play it safe, hedge our bets, and wait a little bit. But I'm excited about the matchup. We've got energy acceleration on both sides, and can safely speak in generic terms right now. I'd say different varieties of energy acceleration, some that are a little more, well, I wouldn't say luck-based, but some that are definitely more consistent.
Yeah, we can't be ignorant to the fact that these players by now know what they're playing.
Yeah.
Again, Pokestats, Tate Whitesall cranking out the information to everybody with Facebook groups, information just firing back and forth. These players have done at least a modicum of research and at least know about what they're going against.
And do you know what, Kirk? Even if they didn't have all those awesome resources at their disposal, they're still sitting right next to all their future, past, present opponents. So if you're at the top table or the top few tables, you're going to see everybody else's decks. Like, there's no way around it. But the key thing here is, in the certain level of confidentiality that the two of us have to respect, are the deck lists. The deck lists are not knowledge, to my knowledge anyways. There's no publication of them, at least at this moment. Now, granted, there will be publication of these lists after the tournament in order for players to review, maybe net deck, maybe even improve, but at any rate, this is top secret.
Absolutely. These deck lists not readily available for either players. However, there are players that like to post their deck lists in the spirit of the community, growing the game, and maybe offering a little bit of guiding light to players that aren't sure what to play, you know, going into their League Cup, what have you. They'll post your list. An example that I keep referring back to is Peter Kika and that Passimian list that he posted a couple days ago. But as you mentioned, we can speak in generalities. I feel comfortable in saying that each player at least knows what they're playing, maybe not the minutia in the deck, but at least know the concepts we're dealing with.
Yeah, although that's the thing, is that the minutia in the deck list, the little tiny details, those actually make the biggest difference sometimes in games where one copy of a card, all the difference, maybe multiples of a card that you don't expect, also all the difference, especially in unfavorable matchups or surprise cards that are included. I mean, how many world championships, how many national championships have been won over the years, not necessarily because somebody was bringing some awesome, crazy rogue deck, but because they made a tiny little change to their deck list that nobody expected, even if it's something kind of bland, like, for example, playing a copy of Olympia or Tate and Lisa or one of those cards, just that type of thing that can really mix things up, throw people off their guard, and then win games.
We've got on my side, I've got Justin's deck list. He's opting to accelerate energy out of his deck with Vikavolt.
Right.
And on Gustavo, who we've had on camera a few times, Malamar.
That's right.
He needs to get the energy in the discard before he can Psychic Recharge them back into play. Caveat there, Kulas has to build himself a Stage 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, and so we just got the heads up, no pun intended, that our headphones are good. Our friends in the back playing their match have their headphones on. So now we can get into the juicy details about the deck list. We have already seen Gustavo on stream a couple times, but let's just go ahead and rehash a couple of these really good points about his special inclusion. So if you've been keeping up with this deck a lot, then if you maybe even net decked it once or twice, you might be familiar with Malamar as the main base, but a couple of the less common inclusions here are Lunala Prism Star. That card, you can only play one copy of it, and then once it's discarded, it's gone for good. It goes straight to the Lost Zone, a special type of discard pile that you can't touch. And it has an attack that lets you accelerate the energy on your board, and an additional attack that lets you deal big damage times the number of total energy you have in play. So lots of offensive options, lots of additional acceleration options. I want to see that maybe do something in one of these matches, one of these games.
If Justin does elect to target down the Inkes and Malamars as they present themselves, that Lunala Prism Star might be a way for Gustavo to get that Psychic Energy acceleration without having to have those abilities online. So those players are ready. We are going to bring you down to the match here. Gustavo on the play leads with a Lunala Prism on key, as we were just talking about. Necrozma GX find its way, and we see a Lily back up to 8. Gustavo wasting no time getting his play set up. Acrobike.
And also important to note that Deoxys, while it can hit for some pretty big damage, it doesn't have quite the best numbers for Rayquaza, but don't count it out entirely, because Gustavo runs 2 copies of Necrozma GX, the regular Necrozma, not Duskmane or Dawnwings. He does run a Dawnwings, but for Black Ray GX, that's an option to spread some damage to all of Justin's GX Pokemon. So if he hits Rayquazas a couple times with the Deoxys, he might be able to follow that up with tons of prizes.
Just want to clarify something real quick. We saw the Acrobike revealing a Mysterious Treasure and a Friend Ball. Friend Ball goes to the discard. Gustavo immediately puts the Mysterious Treasure in the discard, followed by Psychic Energy. So he took the Mysterious Treasure, discarded the Psychic Energy to the Mysterious Treasure, found himself a Psychic Pokemon.
Yeah, right.
Pass just an attachment to Necrozma GX, and Justin leading with an Ultra Ball. Going to find himself a Tapu Lele, pulling that to the front. Doing a quick deck search. Lily, the supporter of choice in these turn ones because of the added bonus you get of being able to draw to 8.
That's right, but you know what? If I'm Justin, I'm wanting to find a little bit more just in that Lele and that Lily, because in order to get my Vikavolt out, I got to get Grubbins. I got to get the basic form of Vikavolt out first. I've got to get rare candies. I've got to actually get more than just one card. And so in order to keep that going, I'm going to go, I mean, in addition to having to draw a decent number of cards, he's also going to have to probably hit another out to a search supporter. We have seen Volkner come into play in a lot of these Vikavolt lists, and I believe that is without exception here. Am I right?
Absolutely. 3 copies of Volkner. We see the lightning energy go onto the Rayquaza. Justin is going to Lily, back up to 8 cards. We do see a rare candy in there, so just needs to get to a Grubbin some way, somehow.
And call me Guy Fieri, because that looks like money right there. That is a money Ultra Ball secret rare going down to get one of those Grubbins. And we got the rare candy floating around in the hand. I presume there's probably at least a search supporter in there, like a Volkner, or some sort of out to it.
Correct. We see the Grubbin pulled to the front. Flavor Town is where we're at right now after your Guy Fieri reference. Grubbin hit the bench. We do see, I thought I saw a gold rare candy in his hand as well. So Justin may be very well poised to start taking some knockouts starting on his turn 2.
Yeah, but with this pass, there is actually a pretty good chance that Gustavo might be able to answer this Grubbin with an immediate knockout. But because he has a supporter card for draw Cynthia as opposed to a supporter card for disruption and offensive power Guzma to bring up that Grubbin, that's not going to happen this turn. Although we still might actually see a knockout here. I mean, 2 Malamar in play turn 2 with the skateboard. There is actually the awesome option to be able to get energy into this card, load it up on the Necrozma GX, retreat the Deoxys for 1 as opposed to 2. Oh, and right on cue, the escape board for the retreat. I'm just wondering if he's going to hit all the cards that he needs to be able to get this knockout on the Ray.
We see the Mysterious Treasure Choice Band, escape board to the Deoxys, Marshadow, letting loose. I don't know what Justin had, but he's got it no longer because 4 cards coming. Judge stapled onto a Pokemon. As we've said it all day long, Marshadow letting loose. Gustavo going to see 4 cards. If he finds Psychic Energy, was it 3 Psychics and an Ultra Ball gets him there, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I haven't exactly checked to be 100% sure how many Psychic are in the discard pile, and it looks like that's what Gustavo's thinking too. I think I just saw 1 or 2 flash by, so it may just come down to drawing the 1 Psychic to retreat. And Gustavo's flipping through his cards, not instantly executing something. I think I see the Psychic right there.
He does have a couple purple Pokemon on the left-hand side of his hand. Not quite sure what they are based on how he's holding. He's going to thumb through his discard. We do have 1 Psychic Recharge available.
But not enough to get that explosive turn 2 start. About maybe a card or 2 off, to be honest, but still a very convincing start. I would feel pretty good in Gustavo's position, even if that wasn't a knockout. And looking at Justin's hand when he flashes it by anyways, he may have access to that. I mean, there's that Ultra Ball and that rare candy right there. So
Ultra Ball, Guzma, and another gold card behind it. Vikavolt getting pulled to the front. Rare candy, that and a Cynthia.
And a Cynthia.
Good night, Gustavo let him loose onto the perfect hand, and he is cashing it in. As you mentioned, matching the swagger of those gold cards, and just a Cynthia going to show him 6 and allow him to convert not only this Vikavolt into strong charge to power up an attacker, but potentially a lot more.
yeah, and by dedicating that escape board to the active Deoxys, kind of reaching a little bit to get that turn 2 knockout on the Rayquaza, that's 1 less escape board that Gustavo is going to have, right? So Gustavo is now going to have pressure on him next turn to score a knockout on this GX Pokemon. Now, if Justin's able to draw into just the right card combination and not have any of the pieces prized, he might be able to score a non-GX knockout with, say, a Delmise, but the odds of that are pretty remote right now. So he might just go ahead and try to get some damage and maybe score a knockout now.
Ultra Ball coming down, Lightning Energy, and the Marshadow that he has in his deck going to the discard, and Rayquaza GX. I would be shocked if we didn't see a Stormy Winds here. He does have a couple energy allowed or available to him in the discard. Perhaps might go a little bit more conservative with it, electing to not Stormy Winds, preserve the energy in the deck so he can use Strong Charge to put them into play.
Right. Now, I like a really interesting point here as far as the order of operations, the way that Justin is sequencing his moves right here. So he's using Strong Charge before benching the Rayquaza and attempting a Stormy Winds. I think that might be in part because he's okay discarding some of these non-energy resources, probably wanting to conserve his energy for the long run and not really put as much pressure on his energy recyclers.
Grubbin Choice Band Cynthia going to the discard. Dragon Break announced, knockout taken, Marshadow into the active. That is Gustavo's preferred promotion, as we've seen earlier today and yesterday. And Cynthia will get him 6 cards, so at least he didn't let himself loose on a bad hand when he played that Marshadow down. However, Justin miles ahead, and Gustavo really needs to get some Psychic Energy into that discard so he can power up that Necrozma GX sitting on the bench.
I don't really know if I'd say miles ahead, though, where Gustavo's at a point where if he just hits the right card combination, then he can go ahead and score the knockout here, get up 1 prize, and without some sort of non-GX knockout option, this moment, then essentially what we're going to be seeing is very similar to a lot of the other matchups we've seen throughout the weekend, where we have an even number of prizes being taken against GX Pokemon versus the same. And effectively, in a weird roundabout way, Gustavo could be ahead as long as he has all the energy that he needs to score this knockout. And he's showing us right on cue, he does have all the Psychic Energy he needs to go ahead and get that Necrozma up there and get that knockout right now.
Prismatic Burst, 3 energies going to the discard off of that Necrozma GX. Too much for Rayquaza to handle, finding himself back in the discard, and player called up from the bench. Rayquaza GX finds itself in the active.
Yeah, and by promoting that Rayquaza, there's a pretty good chance that he's just going to go ahead and try to answer this GX knockout with a GX knockout of his own. Now, important to note is that Justin runs a couple copies of Choice Band, so he actually has the ability to score a couple surprise knockouts with non-GX Pokemon. That Vikavolt could theoretically knock out a GX Pokemon itself, although with only 1 in play, he does not want to risk it getting knocked out.
That is correct. Justin thumbing through his deck, trying to find himself the appropriate Pokemon off of Nest Ball and drop that into play. Shining Lugia pulled to the bottom of the deck. That might be what we see.
That's right, Kirk. I mean, 60 damage plus 60 to a Pokemon with an ability is a very useful, efficient way as far as being able to deal damage with a non-GX Pokemon. Now, because we're seeing, I believe, the Volkner go down, Volkner Full Art, blindingly beautiful Full Art cards, because that's going down, we are going to see a little bit of conservative play here. We aren't seeing one of these Malamars knocked out, and if I'm Justin, I'm feeling a little bad about that because I just like to get the energy acceleration off my opponent's board immediately.
We see the Mysterious Treasure was taken off the Volkner, immediately used to get a Rayquaza, which once benched, if Justin wants that Stormy Winds, will find another energy in play before the Strong Charge.
Yeah, although Justin's still kind of fiddling around with his cards, figuring out the best way to approach it, getting that Strong Charge going on, getting multiple attackers set up, including his active one. Although, I'm wondering if he actually is going to miss this knockout.
Well, Gold Grass Energy hitting the Rayquaza in the active, Lightning going to Shining Lugia. That is 4 energy. Rayquaza represents a 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Milling 3, Rescue Stretcher, Volkner,
Ouch.
Cynthia. Don't want to see that Rescue Stretcher going away. He does have an attachment for turn in hand, so that gets him to 6.
And that's just enough?
That is 180, if my math is correct. Stormy Winds, attachment for turn, Strong Charge gets him to 6 basic energies in play, and knockout.
And this game stays alive for Justin's side. We might have had a little bit of little bit of bearishness as far as his prospects earlier, but he's keeping it in there. So now Gustavo's got to answer back, and that's really what these last few turns are going to come down to. Despite all these cards that both these players use to set up their boards, effectively the game stands a very strong chance of being able to end within the next turn or two, because Gustavo, he needs a knockout on a GX Pokemon, or alternatively the Vikavolt. But with all that energy on the board right now, he would ideally prefer the knockout. And with this, he has the Dawnwing's Necrozma GX with its Moon's Eclipse GX attack, defensive as well as offensive, just enough damage to knock out the Rayquaza GX, but protect itself when it's behind on prizes, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to that Dawnwing's Necrozma.
Does have that invasion ability, which will allow it to jump into the active after it is psychic recharged, or feeling, I should say, psychically recharged. And Moon's Eclipse GX, as you mentioned, a powerful option here, and energy requirements met. Lunala Prism Star also picking up an energy, perhaps to refuel Gustavo's board if he happens to lose some of these Malamar.
Yeah, and a really interesting play by Gustavo here was to play the escape board on his Mars Shadow, even though he had the evasion ability available to him. And I think one reason why that might be the case is because he might be playing the long game here, in the sense that eventually that Dawnwing's Necrozma might go down. So at that point, he doesn't have the invasion ability to give him effectively free retreat. So at that point, he at least has his skateboard on the Mars Shadow. It's never going to be answered because Justin doesn't run Field Blower. And at that point, he's just got free retreat for the rest of the game.
Over to Justin, plays a Tapu Lele GX on the bench, says Wonder Tag, and grabs a Guzma. So he will be able to navigate around the Moon's Eclipse GX and the protection that it provides. Interesting to see what he will target down here, if anything.
And I want to see in these next couple turns if Gustavo has an easy way to just go ahead and seal this game, because that Dawnwing's Necrozma, while it was a great defensive play, it's not exactly helping too much in and of itself. Now, there are a couple things that Gustavo can do. He can hard retreat that Dawnwing's Necrozma to get more psychic energy back into his discard pile if he needs it. And he's got that rescue stretcher in his hand too, so as long as he has the Guzma, he might have game in hand.
Nest Ball coming down. Necrozma GX quickly finding its way to the bench. Dawnwings still in the active. As you mentioned, hard retreat to psychic energy going to the discard. Does he have manually attach? Does he have a manual attachment? Psychic recharge Guzma
and
on
he got the
Rayquaza.
Guzma, and that looks like it's going to be the game.
And Prismatic Burst takes that game from Justin. Justin with a very good setup at the start of the game. You corrected me. I said it seemed like he was miles ahead, but Gustavo quickly able to pivot after a Cynthia into all the cards he needed and take kind of a surprise knockout on that Rayquaza after it took a less than impressive knockout on Deoxys.
Right. Now, with regard to how impressive a knockout is, it isn't necessarily about how much damage you're doing at a given point, but if the knockout that you're doing is going to give you the best positioning as far as the whole game goes. So that Rayquaza GX, for instance, that's dealing big damage. Pretty card, expensive card, but all that said, it's not necessarily the preferred card to have active in that position. And I felt like Justin inherently knew that the same way we were talking about it, where he was eyeing his Delmise, kind of maybe thinking, oh, I wish I had that instead. And going into this next game, that's kind of what I'm hoping to see. Maybe if Gustavo is forcing Justin to give up a Pokemon to be knocked out in exchange for one of Justin's own knockouts, then better it be a non-GX Pokemon as opposed to one of those big Rayquazas, right?
Plenty of time left on the clock, and Justin will get another crack at it to try and win game 2, force a game 3, so his tournament does not end in this top 8 match. Gustavo, on the other hand, trying to make the push to not relinquish his lead that he's kept on this tournament. As I mentioned before, led the pack the whole time. Can't say it enough. Never relinquished that start, that amazing start he had of 9-0 day 1. And here he is in top 8, trying to fend off everybody chasing him down when it comes to the wire.
And, you know, that's a really good point you're bringing up about the time limit here. So notice that the time is actually longer than the normal rounds we've played for the past 14 or so. that's because we are in the single elimination games, the most important games in the whole tournament. So the tournament structure allows for a little bit more time, so 75 minutes instead of just the normal 50. So that said, let's go ahead and get into the action for this game too.
Rayquaza GX in the active for Justin. Grubbin on the bench, already a stronger start than what he had available to him in game one. He had to kind of piece this this setup together. Now he just kind of has it. Mysterious Treasure dumping the Volkner into the discard, says, I don't need you quite yet, buddy. Find myself a Tapu Lele GX, Wonder Tag for Lily, rinse and repeat every turn one.
Lather, rinse, repeat, my friend, and with Mysterious Treasure in the deck, we're getting even more outs to those important supporter cards. We're getting more outs to Rayquaza GXs. It's supplementary. It's something that's being added in addition to the Ultra Ball, which is the more important search card for the most part. But it has its own utility, which you're seeing right now.
Tapu Lele, Wonder Tag, Lily. See if he can play down a couple more cards before playing the Lily, so he can get just an extra card off of that draw supporter.
And you know, Kirk, I think he flashed an Ultra Ball in his hand, so he theoretically could play more cards out of his hand right now in order to draw more. But depending on what else is there, it really ultimately comes down to, is there anything important that he wants to keep? And in addition to that, how much does he fear that Let Loose Marshadow?
Lightning Energy hits the active Lily all the way up, and might have had a gold rare candy in there, is what I thought I saw.
And an Ultra Ball. Yeah, gold. Looks like Ultra Ball and rare candy and a Vikavolt. So at that instance, we have a pretty strong setup, and even without knowing what's in Justin's hand, just playing it blindly, Gustavo is probably like, well, I got to let loose that.
Yeah, and as we know, Gustavo has leveraged Let Loose very well. Kind of crazy last time. Used Let Loose on Justin. He found the perfect 5 cards. Tail ended it with a Cynthia and was unimpeded. However, Friend Ball here allowing Gustavo to find an Inkay, and it's going to find its way to the bench because Malamars are the name of the game for Gustavo Wada here in Memphis.
Yep, Psychic Recharge. Choose a Psychic Energy from your discard pile to put onto one of your benched Pokemon once per turn per Malamar. And we've got plenty of things going on Gustavo's side. With that Friend Ball, we've got the 2 Inkay. He generally wants to get 3 out, but it looks like he is not going to be able to answer the Vikavolt, unless I'm mistaken here, where we know that he's got a Lily in his hand, but is he... Oh, and what? Oh, and yeah, and he goes for the Lily for 7 cards, matching Justin's turn with his own equally strong board position, getting 2 Inkay, maybe hoping to get a 3rd, but perhaps following this up with a Let Loose if it's not prized.
Malamar, excuse me, not Malamar, Ultra Ball, pitching some Psychic Energies. Inkay coming down. Gustavo not eyeing up Malamar, or mistaking myself, Marshadow for the Let Loose just yet, as you mentioned. Good order of operations there. Gustavo playing a lot of cards out of his hand to whittle it down and maximize that Lily.
Oh, and I like him putting that Rayquaza to sleep. That way he gives himself a chance to not be knocked out next turn, even though he had with the Let Loose to stop the Vikavolt. So on cue, we're going to go ahead and see that turn 2 strong charge, but Justin's going to have to approach this in the right way. I think that based off of how busted his hand was off that Lily, he can get around it if he wants to.
Rare Candy hitting the bin. Vikavolt finding its way on top of a Grubbin. Justin eyeing up the Ultra Ball, seeing what he wants to discard. A lot of powerful cards in his hand. A little remiss to let go of any of them. After a little bit of deliberation, Rare Candy hits the discard, along with, I believe that's the 2nd copy of Volkner of the game going to the discard.
Now, this may be a little greedy. If I'm not mistaken, I think I see a regular art Rayquaza GX in his hand right now. If he has just the right situation, if he has either a energy in his discard pile or is able to discard one off of Stormy Winds, he could set up a non-GX attack, but that doesn't look like he's going with it, so he's just going to go ahead and fish out the key components of his deck, set up a little bit, thanks in part to this Inkay putting him to sleep with Hypnosis, and then maybe just punting the ball for this turn.
Nothing like taking a conservative line. You know, no need to force it when you don't have to. Gustavo doing his thing, but Justin is in a very good position
Oh,
here.
and on the last one of those cards, that lightning energy, that's big.
Lightning energy off the Stormy Winds, adding to the potential damage output of Rayquaza GX's Dragon Break attack. Justin carefully and casually saying strong charge, and we're going to see some energies come into play.
Yeah, and that said, while he was able to strong charge and get his board set up to the point where next turn he's going to be at the ideal position, Gustavo could hit just the right combination to be able to severely punish Justin's board, where that Rayquaza, despite its 180 HP, is actually really... oh, wait a second. Okay, so...
Guzma comes down, targets Dawnwing's Necrozma.
And just to be clear, he hasn't played a supporter this turn, right?
No,
okay,
no, he
good.
has not. He discarded a bunch of supporters off of Ultra Ball, etc. Comes in, Dragon Break for 120 onto the Dawnwing's Necrozma, as mentioned. Energy Escape Board, Malamar coming down, and a Cynthia. Gustavo going to crack it, 6 cards. Going to try and find a couple more Malamar so he can really start using Psychic Recharge to his advantage.
Oh, yeah, find a couple more Malamar, have the energy in the discard pile to follow up on it, and then just go one shot, however he has to. With the Moon's Eclipse GX, that's not even a factor right now. Can't even use it when you're... well, actually scratch that because he is behind on prizes. So that could be a defensive option if he wants to go with it. In order to set up that play last turn, Justin had to give up a Guzma. So he could potentially, Gustavo that is, could potentially bait Justin into using another Guzma. So if that's one line of play, maybe Gustavo might want to save his GX attack and just stick with a big hit here. But with Invasion, he's able to set himself up for all that he needs without any additional cards to just secure a knockout.
So Justin actually hasn't taken a prize yet this game. I believe the way he has his
I'm
prizes
sorry.
laid out are 3 on top of 3.
Tricky.
So just a quick note there. Nestball finds an Inkay, which will put it right onto the bench. Inkay is certainly the first step of the plan, but the second step of that plan is Malamar, and that's where he needs to be right now, especially after having to hard retreat into an Inkay, maybe eyeing up another Hypnosis play on this Rayquaza carrying all these energy.
Yeah, and I just hate seeing that right now if I'm Gustavo, where I would rather avoid anything remotely like that. Seeing if he's sitting on Guzma or something. So we've got the Hypnosis play stalling out the board a little bit more.
And wakes
up.
Wake
this time, yeah.
Psychic Recharge, it is to note, hit that Dawnwing's Necrozma with the Invasion and the Escape Board. Will be able to come in, retreat, and offer Gustavo a little bit of a pivot there. Justin, however, has a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Rayquaza in the active with 3 energy on it and 1 strong charge away from being able to take knockouts on those 180 HP GX Pokemon.
Yeah, that's right, although we might see a repeat of the last game because the moment the Cynthia goes down, Justin is locked into not actually being able to knock out a Pokemon for more than 1 prize this turn. With the bench Rayquaza, was that a hard attach I saw? The one that's currently covered up by his deck. I think that was just
yes.
a manual attachment there. So Justin can't just immediately respond with, say, Shining Lugia for 60 or Delmise for 130. So he can't set up Gustavo on the prize exchange that's the most beneficial for him right now, just trading that Inkay for something.
Shining Lugia hits the bench for Justin. He has yet to use his strong charge, but as you mentioned, he did attach for turn. 1 grass, 1 lightning energy coming into play, provided he has them both available, which at this stage of the game, it would be a shock if he did not.
Yeah, it looks like we have 3/3 of each.
Coming down on the Shining Lugia, a non-GX attacker, single prize attacker, might be a route for Justin to take. We're going to see how he decides to go through the final stages of this turn.
Yeah, but the unfortunate thing is that if he's already manually attached that grass energy to the hidden Rayquaza right now, the one that's underneath his deck as he's shuffling, then he doesn't have a way to knock out the Inkay with the Shining Lugia, although, granted, even if he wanted to do that, that'd be pretty costly. That would cost him a pretty hefty retreat on the Ray, so he'd be very hard-pressed to work off of his one switch.
Oh, boy.
just get
Justin
it.
Kulas, Tempest GX, discards a couple energy of Vikavolt Rare Candy, and he draws 10. Gustavo's bench is filled, so no fear of getting Marshadowed out of these 10 cards right now. However, Gustavo can somehow step up and take a knockout with Prismatic Burst. That's a great look for him.
Yeah, and speaking of great looks, some of the best looks that you can have in the game are when you force your opponent into awkward board positions, where I think Gustavo might have been really counting on some sort of knockout on his Inkay to clear up his energy, get things going. What is that? It looks like a Cynthia going down, trying to hit that right combination of cards, and we might just see another repeat of the last turn. Might see an attempt to go for that Prismatic Burst for a knockout.
Cynthia going to draw 6. Another Malamar in play for Gustavo. So those Psychic Recharges are starting to power up their battery packs right now. And we'll see what kind of attacker Gustavo can cobble together. And it looks like an attachment for turn. Double Psychic Recharge. Hard retreat from the Inkay. Gustavo wants this knockout.
Necrozma GX, that big bad Necrozma for a big amount of damage. Or, yeah, for the big amount of damage, just for the clean knockout.
So Necrozma GX has an ability, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but its ability says it has protection from colorless Pokemon.
That's right, and you know that ability is very easy for players to forget, and you've actually had a couple crazy scenarios on official streams, on streams before, where that ability was forgotten. However, both these players as judge are both very aware of that ability, so Shining Lugia is not going to be damaging that Necrozma. Easiest way to think about it is Necrozma's a Pokemon that's colorless in a lot of ways. It's stealing the light, right? It's stealing the light, and so because it's stealing the light Pokemon like Lugia aren't going to be dealing the damage, but Rayquaza is bringing the heat.
What that does for Gustavo is it forces Justin to promote a Rayquaza GX into the active, so forcing Justin to keep going in with those 2 prize attackers. We see him manually attach to the new Rayquaza GX on the bench. Choice Band coming down. Justin, plenty of options after that Tempest GX, feeding him 10 cards, grubbing, and just a Cynthia stack of cards going back into the deck. He wants 6 new ones.
A lot of options, but I'm feeling like he's even further behind than he was in the last game, where despite having a pretty good setup and 10 cards to work with however he wanted, he's down 2 prizes right now. He's down by a turn, even though he was the player who went first this game. So as a result of that, he's basically between a rock and a hard place.
Indeed. Volkner, I believe that was Delmai's second card back. And Justin going to take inventory of his discard, make sure he knows exactly what resources he has available to him.
Oh, man. And with
Energy Recycler, going to buy back some energies, making sure those charges stay strong.
Yep, stay strong, my friends. But with his own Marshadow, Justin might be hoping to put Gustavo in a board situation where he isn't going to have the immediate follow-up. There are only a limited number of attackers in Gustavo have, so if Justin times his Marshadow just the right way, then he could be able to protect himself this game. Now, very important to note here. So we've been talking about prize exchanges when some Pokemon are worth 2 prizes, some are worth 1. That Shining Lugia has a chance to be a real star here now that the players are even in prizes. So Gustavo's probably want to go ahead and be very careful about when he brings up that Dawn Wings.
That Dawn Wings does have 120 damage on it. It is riding a skateboard carrying a Psychic Energy. So he will be able to use that to pivot this turn if he wants it.
Oh, and the Lunala Prism Star is coming down. This is spicy.
We see the next Malamar hitting the bench. He has 3 Psychic Recharges available. Lunala also coming into play. Inkay riding a skateboard will also be able to retreat if he wants it. And Lily back up to 6. Quick count from Gustavo. Doesn't want to make a misstep in the late stages of this tournament. Choice Band onto Lunala Prism. 3 Psychic Recharges. Are we going to start attacking with Lunala Prism?
We are in with Prism, boys. We are in there. And let's see. And of course, right on cue, having to check Lunala Prism Star. Relatively underused card in the current format for Malamar decks, but it's being a real star right now, dealing big damage. 20 times the total number of energy on the board right there. Plenty to go around.
Taking a knockout and single prize attacker is what this is coming down to. Justin may not have seen that play coming. Not quite out of left field. Gustavo setting it up very nicely. And now a Rayquaza GX into the active. Gustavo, 2 prizes left to take. Down to the wire.
Yeah. Now, one thing I really would have liked to see in the previous game was Gustavo had that Lunala Prism Star out in the first turn. So even if you're not really aware of the card, if you're seeing something for the first time, just go ahead and grab it and take a look at it real quick. Yep. After asking your opponent nicely, of course.
We see a quick search here. Was that a Mysterious Treasure dumping a Grubbin?
Yes.
Allowing Justin access to his deck here. Gonna cruise through, take a look at what options he has. Hand back at the deck, taking a look. We pull a Rainbow Rare Rayquaza. Another way to get another attacker onto the board. And not to mention that Justin energy recycled last turn and was able to rare candy into another Vikavolt this turn.
Yeah, and it definitely feels like with the way that this game's played out, and now with another GX Pokemon going down, Gustavo's in a great position as far as his prize exchange with his opponent, where his opponent's putting even more GX Pokemon into play, and he's putting pressure on Justin with that non-GX Pokemon. And so there really isn't as much benefit in knocking that out because he's going on an odd prize exchange where he has to knock out 2 more Pokemon in order to be able to win this game after the Lunala.
Cynthia played for Justin, which means Gustavo's bench is safe, and namely that Dawnwing Necrozma is safe from
and it looks like he's just putting the cards away. I think he sees the writing on the wall and says, hey, man, this game's over. We did our best, but you know what? Sometimes the Rays just have to go home.
Absolutely unceremonious finish for Justin to this tournament. Gustavo, however, keeps it rolling in this top 8.
For
keeps
sure.
It rolling in this top 8, and he is poised to win himself the Memphis Regional Championship.
That's right. He's now in the top 4. But, hey, we got to give Justin his props, making it so far in the tournament, being one of the only 2 Vikavolt Rayquaza players left in the whole thing, despite how widely that deck was used. Bringing it to a really solid finish. Congrats to both players. But Gustavo Wada is going to go ahead and carry this matchup onward and maybe into the top 4 and beyond.
Definitely in the top 4. He's definitely secured himself there. Let's see if he can get to the finals. And as we mentioned, hold on to that lead that he's had. Take this thing down.
That's right.
Leave himself with a nice little piece of glass that says champion on it.
We might be able to get himself a nice little piece of plexiglass in a bit anyways, no matter how this top 4 match goes. So we will be right back in a little bit with an interview.
Thank you.
Hello, and we are back at the 2018 Memphis Regional Championship for the Pokemon trading card game. And to my right is the victor of our streamed live match for the top 8, Gustavo Wada. Congrats, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
Feeling great. Like, I'm top 4, yeah.
So maybe you can tell me a little bit about the lead into the tournament when you were figuring out what you wanted to play. What made you decide that Malamar was the best call for this tournament?
I decided Malamar because I really didn't want to lose against Sylveon or Steelix decks.
Fair enough.
Control decks. So Malamar has a pretty good match against it and can face like everything in format. So seems like a good choice.
Cool. So about when did you decide on it? Like the night before, like some people, or like a couple weeks out?
I decided deck like Friday night.
So what else were you thinking about playing, and what
Zoroark.
won? So was it those matchups that won Malamar for you?
Sorry?
Was it those matchups that made you decide on Malamar?
Yeah, like I was thinking also in Zoroark, but the matches are too close in every game, so and auto lost to every control deck, so I decided not to play it and play Malamar because of the control decks, and also because it don't have like so close matchups.
Right. So out of the 6 decks remaining, is there anyone that you feel particularly concerned about? You feel pretty good about the matchup spread?
Sorry?
Is there any particular matchup that you feel a little concerned about as opposed to the others out of the remaining 6 decks?
What is
Concerning meaning that you are worried about that you don't want to play against.
Face a mirror match. Mirror match that always Malamar mirror match that always really close.
Yeah.
And Zoro control a bit. Like it's not as bad, but I have to start pretty well.
Great. So maybe tell me a bit about the rest of your season so far. How's your season gone up to this point? Is this the first major tournament you've been to since Worlds, or have you been playing in a couple other regionals?
I play Brazilian regionals, Balneário Camboriú. I made top 32 there. And I play also Philly.
Great.
Made top 16.
And that's a pretty cool thing, too, is that you live in Brazil, right? And you're Brazilian, but you find a chance to play in the tournaments here in the United States. How do you feel the tournaments in Brazil are, or not necessarily in that sense, but how do you think they're different?
The meta game is pretty different.
Yeah.
Like in Brazil, you have many more decks. Like
a bigger variety of decks?
Yeah. So we have more control decks in Brazil. The decks has more text than in US.
So things like more things kind of like this, like Sylveon and whatnot?
Yeah, there is more in Brazil.
Okay.
So I prefer to play in West. Like meta game is more consolidated.
More more consolidated, a little more, maybe a little more predictable too.
Yeah, a little more predictable, and besides the tournament is pretty harder. Like more rounds, a lot of good players, but I prefer to play in the West.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's great. Glad you've been enjoying your time here so far. Congratulations on doing so well, and best of luck in the later rounds.
Thanks, man.
And right back to you for a interview or.